Go find standing room in the back. These seats are for family, not charity cases. My cousin Alexis didn't whisper. She announced it to the entire Savannah auction house. The laughter from the surrounding socialites was sharp, like breaking glass. Then the waiter arrived, not with champagne, but with a bill. $2,400. The holding fee for the vanity bid my Uncle Robert had just placed. He didn't even look at me. He just tapped the table. I didn't argue. I pulled out my card and paid for the privilege of being humiliated. But as I turned to leave, a voice cut through the room like a gavel. Just a moment, please, before I tell you exactly how my great-aunt silenced the entire room. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Turning back wasn't an option. Waiting for an apology that would never come was a waste of valuable time. I walked out of that auction house with my spine straight and my eyes dry. The heavy, wet heat of Savannah usually clings to you like a second skin, but that afternoon, I felt nothing but a glacial chill. It wasn't sadness, it was clarity. I drove past my apartment. I didn't want to go home. I went to the only place that actually mattered in this equation. The firm. Uncle Robert's architecture firm. The one where my name wasn't on the door, but my fingerprints were on every single blueprint. The office was empty, silent, and smelling of lemon polish and stale ambition. I sat at my desk, the one pushed into the corner, away from the windows, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating the only truth I had left. I navigated to the shared server, Project Meridian, the massive commercial development Uncle Robert needed to secure his investors, the one he couldn't design to save his life. I looked at the folder. It contains 6 months of my life. Late nights, skipped, meals, the kind of detailed structural engineering that Robert couldn't even read, let alone create. I know what you're thinking. Why did I pay the bill? Why did I swipe my card for $2,400 when they had just spat in my face? It's a valid question, but unless you've lived it, you can't understand the invisible architecture of my life. For 20 years, I lived in a jail without bars. There were no locks on the doors, no guards in the hallway, but the walls were made of something stronger than steel. Gratitude. We took you in when no one else wanted you. That was the mortar. You owe us for the air you breathe. That was the concrete. When you grow up in that kind of prison, you learn that compliance isn't a choice. It's survival. You learn that if you make yourself small enough, quiet enough, useful enough, maybe, just maybe, they won't remind you that you don't belong. Paying that bill wasn't submission. It was a habit. It was the muscle memory of a prisoner who still stands for count even after the cell door is open. But as I stared at the progress bar on my screen, I realized something. That $2,400 wasn't a fee. It was a severance package. It was the last penny I would ever pay for the rent on my own existence. I selected the entire Meridian directory. Right-click, encrypt. I typed in a password, a random string of characters that didn't mean anything to anyone but me. I didn't save it. I didn't write it down. I watched the green progress bar turn red as the files locked down one by one. The architectural renderings, the CAD files, the structural analysis, all of it transformed from valuable intellectual property into useless digital noise. My phone buzzed. Aunt Sarah probably calling to scold me for leaving before the photo op. I didn't decline the call. I just turned the phone over. This wasn't a tantrum. It was an audit. They had extracted value from me for 2 decades, trading room and board for my soul. Today, the ledger was finally balanced. I closed the laptop. The office was dark, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the shadows. I was the one casting them. I spent the next hour watching the office clock tick. Each second was a quiet victory. I thought about the first time I sat at this desk. I was 22, fresh out of architecture school, top of my class. Uncle Robert had slapped a stack of zoning applications on the desk and said, "Start earning your keep." He didn't offer a salary, he offered an allowance. He called it an internship. 5 years later, I was still the intern who designed his buildings, managed his contractors, and saved his reputation. All for a paycheck that barely covered my rent. I looked around the office. The awards on the wall had his name on them, but I knew which late nights had earned them. I knew which structural flaws I'd caught just in time. I knew the weight of every beam and the cost of every rivet. I was the ghost in the machine, the invisible engine that kept his little empire running. And like any engine, I had just cut the fuel line. My phone buzzed again. This time, I picked it up. "Madison, what is going on?" Aunt Sarah's voice was tight, the polite veneer cracking at the edges. "Robert is trying to access the Meridian files for the investors' meeting tomorrow. He says they're corrupted." "They aren't corrupted," I said, my voice calm. "They're encrypted." "Encrypted? What are you talking about? Fix it now." "I can't do that, Aunt Sarah." "Excuse me? Do you have any idea how important this meeting is? Robert needs those renderings. If he doesn't secure this funding..." She trailed off, the threat implicit. "We fed you. We clothed you when your parents died. We gave you a home when you had nothing. And this is how you repay us? By sabotaging your family?" There it was, the debt, the eternal ledger. "I'm not sabotaging anything." I said, "I'm negotiating. I've been working here for 5 years, Aunt Sarah. I've designed 3 commercial centers, 2 residential complexes, and the new library downtown. And I'm still making less than the receptionist. This is about money." She scoffed, the sound sharp and incredulous. "After everything we've done for you. We took you in, Madison. We raised you. That wasn't free. You think groceries are free? You think tuition is free?" "I paid my own tuition," I corrected her. "And I've paid for my groceries since I was 16. But let's talk about what isn't free. My labor, my designs, my intellectual property. You say you raised me? Fine. Let's calculate the cost of room and board versus the market value of a senior architect's salary for 5 years. I've done the math, Sarah. You owe me." Silence on the other end. Then a low, dangerous tone. I recognized. "You are ungrateful," she hissed. "We saved you. You would be nothing without us, just a sad little orphan with nowhere to go. And now you think you can hold us hostage? Fix the files, Madison, or don't bother coming back." "I wasn't planning to," I said. "What?" "I resign." "You can't resign," she laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You're family. You don't get to quit family." "Watch me." I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of finally saying the words out loud. You don't get to quit family. That was their trap. The idea that blood was a binding contract, that abuse was just the cost of admission. They had normalized cruelty until I thought it was love. They had convinced me that my value lay only in my utility. But the shackles were off now, and I wasn't just walking away. I was walking toward something. I packed my personal items into a single box, my father's drafting compass, a framed photo of my mother, my license. I left the company laptop on the desk, the encrypted drive glowing like a beacon. I walked out of the building and into the humid Savannah evening. The air felt thick, heavy with impending rain. I got into my car and drove, not to my apartment, but to the one place I knew I would find the truth. Great Aunt Elizabeth's estate stood on a hill overlooking the river, a grand old house that had seen generations rise and fall. She was the matriarch, the one person Uncle Robert feared. She was also the only one who had ever looked at me and seen me, not just a useful asset. I pulled into the driveway. The lights were on in the parlor. She was waiting. Great Aunt Elizabeth sat in her high-backed velvet chair, looking less like an elderly woman and more like a queen holding court. The air in her parlor smelled of lavender and old paper. She didn't offer me tea. She offered me a seat with a sharp nod. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice raspy but strong. "Alexis has the manners of a hyena, and Robert has the spine of a jellyfish." "I quit," I said, the words still tasting strange in my mouth, and I locked the Meridian files. Elizabeth smiled, a slow, thin curving of her lips. "Good. It's about time you grew some teeth, girl. I've been watching you let them walk all over you for years. I was beginning to wonder if you liked the footprints." I didn't have a choice. I defended myself. They were my family. They took me in. "They took you in because they needed a servant, not a daughter," she corrected me sharply. "And you let them because you were scared. But fear is a useless emotion, Madison. It doesn't build buildings, and it certainly doesn't build a life." She reached for a small silver bell on the table and rang it once. A moment later, her butler appeared, followed by two people I didn't recognize. A man in a sharp suit carrying a briefcase, and a woman with glasses and a tablet. "Madison, meet Arthur Pendleton, the best property lawyer in Georgia." Elizabeth gestured to the man. "And this is Sarah Jenkins, a forensic accountant who could find a missing penny in a haystack." I looked at them, confused. Why are they here? "Because we are done playing house," Elizabeth said, leaning forward. "You resigned. That's a good first step, but resignation implies you were just an employee. You weren't. You were the intellectual property engine of that firm, and now we are going to make sure you get paid for it." Arthur opened his briefcase and slid a document across the table. "This is a formal cease and desist order," he explained. "It prohibits your uncle's firm from using any designs, renderings, or concepts created by you without express written permission and fair market compensation. Since you never signed an employment contract transferring your intellectual property rights, a significant oversight on your uncle's part, you own everything you created." "Everything?" I asked, looking at the legal jargon. "Every line, every measurement," Arthur confirmed. "If he wants to build Project Meridian, he has to buy the designs from you, at your price." And that's just the beginning. Sarah, the accountant, chimed in. "Elizabeth asked me to look into the family trust, the one your parents set up for you, the one your uncle claims was exhausted by your upbringing." My chest tightened. He said there wasn't much left, just enough for college, which he said he paid for. "He lied," Sarah said bluntly. "I've started tracing the accounts. It's a mess of shell companies and transfers, but the initial principal was significant, and it wasn't exhausted. It was drained systematically." Drained. "We'll get to the numbers later," Elizabeth interrupted her, eyes hard. "Right now, we need to secure your position. You are not going back to that office. You are not answering their calls. Arthur will handle all communication. You are now a creditor, Madison, and they are the debtors." She stood up, leaning heavily on her cane. "You thought you were fighting for a paycheck? No, child. You are fighting for your life. Robert isn't just greedy. He's desperate. People like him don't react well when the ATM stops dispensing cash. He will attack you. He will slander you. He will try to destroy you. She walked over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Let him try," she whispered. "He's about to find out that he didn't just raise a sheep. He raised a wolf." I looked at the cease and desist order. I looked at the forensic accountant who was unraveling the mystery of my parents' legacy. And finally, I looked at Elizabeth. "What do I do?" I asked. "Sign the papers," she said, "and then get ready for war." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake this time. I signed my name, Madison Hayes. It looked different on the paper, stronger, sharper. "One more thing," Elizabeth said as I finished. "That property Robert bid on today, the one you paid the holding fee for? What about it?" "It wasn't a random investment," she said, her voice dropping lower. "There's a reason he wanted it so badly. And there's a reason he made you pay for it." She looked at Arthur, who nodded gravely. "We need to go to the records office," Arthur said. "There's something you need to see, something about the history of that building." "And whose name is really on the original deed?" I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Whose name?" "Your father's," Elizabeth said. The records office was a cavernous space filled with rows of metal filing cabinets and the dusty smell of history. Arthur navigated the labyrinth with practiced ease, leading me to a section marked Commercial Deeds 1990 to 2000. He pulled a heavy binder from a shelf and flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. "Here," he said, tapping a yellow document. "Look at the original owner." I leaned in, squinting at the faded type. For Alexis, luxury cars, vacations, and propping up his failing firm. It's embezzlement, plain and simple. "So, what's the plan?" I looked between them. "We wait," Arthur said. "Tomorrow is the groundbreaking ceremony for his new project. He's invited the press, the investors, the mayor. He thinks he's in the clear." "He thinks I'm gone," I added. "Exactly," Elizabeth said, stepping out from behind a row of shelves. She had insisted on coming, leaning heavily on her cane, but refusing to stay behind. "He thinks you're cowering in your apartment crying over a bounced check. He has no idea you're holding a match." She handed me a thick red folder. "This contains everything: the forensic accounting report, the original deed, the proof of the illegal transfer, and a formal eviction notice for his current firm, which, as it turns out, is operating out of another building owned by your trust." "An eviction notice? He's been squatting on your property for years," Sarah confirmed. "Time to collect rent or kick him out." I took the folder. It felt heavy, substantial. It felt like a weapon. "Tomorrow," Elizabeth said, her eyes gleaming, "you go to that ceremony. You look him in the eye, and you take back what is yours." "I will," I promised. The next morning, I dressed for a funeral or an execution. A sharp black suit, heels that clicked like gunshots on pavement, and my mother's pearl earrings. I drove to the site of 412 Bull Street. A stage had been erected in front of the beautiful old brick building. Banners proclaimed, "The Future of Savannah Commerce." Uncle Robert stood at the podium, beaming, with Aunt Sarah and Cousin Alexis pining beside him. The press was there. The investors were there. It was the perfect audience for a tragedy. I parked my car right behind the news vans. I checked the red folder one last time. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the sunlight. I wasn't the shadow architect anymore. I was the demolition crew. Uncle Robert's voice boomed over the microphone, talking about vision and legacy. He pointed to the building behind him, claiming he was honoring its history by giving it a new future. A generic strip mall future. The investors nodded, bored but satisfied. Alexis smiled for the cameras, playing the role of the devoted daughter and a parent. I walked through the crowd. I didn't push. People just moved out of my way. There was something about the way I was walking, the set of my shoulders, the sheer inevitability of my presence. Aunt Sarah saw me first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed into slits. She started to move toward me, probably to intercept me, to hiss threats about ruining the moment. But I didn't stop. I walked right past her, up the stairs to the stage. Uncle Robert faltered mid-sentence. "Madison, what are you doing here?" I didn't take the microphone. I didn't need to. The acoustics of the old square carried my voice just fine. "You said this seat was for family," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You were right. This building is my family's. Get off my property." "She's upset," Robert said quickly to the crowd, forcing a laugh. "Personal matters. Stress." "It's not stress, Robert. It's fraud," I countered, placing the red folder on the podium. "This contains forensic accounting of the $900,000 you embezzled from my trust fund over 20 years. It contains the original deed to this building, proving it belonged to my parents, James and Eleanor Hayes. And it contains proof that you illegally transferred the title to yourself while acting as executive." The cameras were flashing now. The investors were whispering. Alexis looked like she was about to faint. "You're lying!" Sarah shrieked from the side of the stage. "She's lying! She's mentally unstable! The eviction notice is on top!" I continued, ignoring her. "You have 30 days to vacate your current offices, which are also owned by the trust you looted. As for this building, no one is touching a single brick." I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had made me feel small for my entire life was now shrinking before my eyes. He wasn't a titan of industry. He was just a thief in a cheap suit. "We took you in," he sputtered, desperate. "We raised you. You stole my inheritance to pay for your daughter's private school and your country club membership," I said. "You didn't raise me. You robbed me." Arthur stepped up onto the stage then, flanked by 2 police officers. Elizabeth had called them. She didn't do half measures. "Robert Hayes," Arthur said. "I'm representing Madison Hayes. We are filing charges for embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. These officers would like a word." I turned away as they read him his rights. I didn't need to see the handcuffs. I didn't need to see Sarah weeping, or Alexis screaming at the cameramen to stop filming. I walked back down the stairs, past the stunned investors, past the murmuring crowd. Great Aunt Elizabeth was waiting by her car. She opened the door for me. "Well done," she said. "Is it over?" I asked. "The war?" "Yes," she smiled. "But the rebuilding, that's just starting." The fallout was swift and brutal. The scandal made the front page of the Savannah Morning News. Investors pulled out. The firm collapsed within a week. Robert and Sarah were indicted on multiple counts of fraud. Alexis, complicit in spending money she knew wasn't hers, faced her own legal battles and social exile. The charity case had become the plaintiff, and the judgment was $2.76 million. But I didn't care about the money. I cared about the keys. Arthur handed them to me a month later, the keys to 412 Bull Street. I unlocked the heavy oak doors and walked into the lobby. It was dusty and empty, but the bones were good. Strong. Just like my parents. I set up my drafting table in the center of the room, right where the sunlight hit the floorboards. I was going to restore it. Not tear it down, restore it. I would build my own firm here. A firm where credit was given, where labor was valued, where no one was ever made to feel like a ghost in their own life. Great Aunt Elizabeth visited me on the first day. She brought a bottle of champagne and 2 crystal flutes. "To the future," she toasted. "To the foundation," I corrected her. I opened my laptop. The encrypted files for Robert's project were still there. I didn't need the password anymore. I selected them all. Right-click, delete. The screen cleared. The past was gone. I picked up my pencil and started to draw. It has been 6 months since I cleared that server. The sign on the door now reads, "Hayes and Associates." There are no associates yet, just me. But the space is ready. The dust is gone. The floor is gleam. And for the first time in my life, the silence isn't heavy. It's expectant. Uncle Robert and Aunt Sarah are currently awaiting trial. They sold their estate to pay legal fees, but it wasn't enough. Cousin Alexis sends me messages sometimes, asking if we can talk, but I blocked her number the day the judgment was finalized. I don't feel guilty about that silence anymore. I don't feel the need to pay for their attention or earn their basic decency. The most dangerous lie they ever told me wasn't about money. It was about belonging. They taught me that love was a transaction, that I had to buy my seat at the table with labor, with silence, with gratitude for scraps. They made me believe that walking away meant I would be alone. But I'm not alone. I have Elizabeth, I have my work, and I have the most important thing of all. I have myself. I want to speak directly to you now, to the person watching this who feels like a ghost in their own home, to the one who is always the first to apologize and the last to be thanked, to the one who feels like they are standing on the edge of their family, looking in through a window that never opens. I know you are tired. I know you are afraid that if you stop paying the price of admission, you will lose everything. You think that the coldness of their affection is better than the coldness of the world outside. I need you to listen to me. That fear is the prison they built for you. It isn't real. The moment you stop buying your own humiliation is the moment your real life begins. You are not a burden. You are not a charity case. You are the architect of your own future. It is terrifying to walk away from the only people you have ever known. It feels like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. But I promise you, you won't fall. You will fly. You don't need their table. You don't need their approval. You have your own hands, your own mind, and your own worth. That is the only foundation that will never crumble. If you've ever had to buy your own seat at the table, or if you're currently building your own table from scratch, I want you to share this story. You are not alone, and your legacy is waiting for you to build.